Welcome, everybody. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. Coming at you live from New York. This is Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in. And my name is Dal Grunga, and I'm here with my good friend Vasudev, who's been our guest this week. Today is Wednesday, so we're halfway through. It's been wonderful conversing with you, Vasudev, discussing the Bhagavad Gita and just hearing your realizations and reflections on life. Thank you for being here again. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
How has it been? How has it been for you this week being on Spirit Matters? Any feedback for me?
It's been really encouraging actually and inspiring. It's nice to have this kind of like daily spiritual check-in and be kind of put on the spot.
You're totally put on the spot. People are counting on you for
Yeah,
spiritual sustenance. Don't let
yeah,
them down.
yeah,
I
yeah. I
look in
was
the mirror
thinking
every
about,
day and tell myself that. Don't you let people down. Just joking.
I was chanting my japa, doing my chanting today, and I was thinking about a discussion, keeping the goal in mind and being more focused. It would help.
It's beautiful to have these little reminders, right? I always quote
Yeah,
Samuel Douglas. I think it's Samuel Douglas. Samuel Douglas or Samuel Johnson, one of the two, an English author and writer from a while ago, that he said that people need to be reminded much more than they need to be instructed. And I think in spiritual life, we sometimes think, I got to say something deep and spiritual, or I got to come up with
yeah.
some
That's
new, what was it? Prabhupada's definition of the Shastra definition of a muni. A sage is somebody who can say something that's never been said before, create some
yeah.
argument that no one's ever heard before. And we sometimes think that spiritual life has to be deep and new, and I've never heard that before. But actually, we just need to hear the same things again and again.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true.
You
Very
know,
true.
we forget things, and we forget simple truths. And can we apply those real deeply?
When I first started reading Prabhupada's books, I was thinking, you know, first of all, you read his. There's a lot of new things, but then you start keep on reading for a while, and it's just the same points made over and over again. And at one point, I started to think, why is he just repeating the same thing all the time? And but now I understand what he's actually doing.
Yeah, I realize because I haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It takes a while for these things to sink in.
totally. It's like I just got off I have a new slot in which I practice mridanga. I have a teacher from Italy, Shameshwari Mridangawali. And so we moved our slot in the morning right before the podcast now. And because she's in Italy, and so there's a difference in time zone. And you learn a mantra, and they teach you mridanga and mantras. You learn dedikata, and et cetera, whatever it might be. And then just kind of like you learn it, and then you're ready to move on to the next one. Okay, I learned it. What do I do now? And the teacher will say, go practice that every day for a month, for an hour. And it's like, no, I already know it. And like, I know you know it, but you have to go and master it. You have to go. And it's not something like, oh, I know the Bhagavad Gita because I can remember that verse from the third chapter, or I know Krishna consciousness because I'm aware that I'm not a spirit soul. But you may be aware of those things, but how much, and that's where it's so beautiful. One of my favorite verses and purports from Prabhupada in the Bhagavad Gita is chapter 9, verse 1, where Krishna says that because you're not envious, I will impart to you this knowledge and realization. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport mentions that Krishna understands the sincerity. He talks about how important it is to hear and chant in the association of devotees, how important it is to hear about Krishna, hear spiritual realization in the association of other people, which is what we're doing here. And also that Krishna understands the sincerity of the heart of a devotee from within and reciprocates with them accordingly, giving them realization. And he talks about the difference between gyan and vijnana and knowledge and realization. And that to know something is one thing, but to realize it actually very deeply. And in some ways, the truths of spiritual life are so simple, but how deeply do I realize them? How much do I actually know I'm a spirit soul and I'm not my body? And how much do I actually spend? Vera Budra, our friend Vera, did this exercise with some people once. He shares with people where you make a list of all the things that you value. I value my relationships. I value my health, etc. You make a list of all the things that you value, and then you make a list and you set that list completely aside, and then you just make an actual like report of how you spend your time every day.
Mm.
Just write it all down. Then how much time you spend eating, how much time you spend sleeping, how much time you spend exercising, how much time you spend scrolling on social media. Like you just almost like an investigative reporter, like just look at how you spend your time and then match those two things up. Does the
Mm.
way I spend my time match my values? And oftentimes, frighteningly, it doesn't. And we think, oh, I have a value. I have a sense of what I think is important, but it's not realized. I need to hear it
Mm.
again and again with an
Yeah.
open heart.
Yeah.
So that's what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Upanishads give us a nice formula how to do study and retention of that study and realization of that study. They give a
Mm,
threefold practice. First, start with Shravana, you hear or read. Uh, you hear from a teacher or read, like we're reading Prabhupada's books or other teachers, great teachers' books. So just to start by hearing, but to retain it, you have to what's called do manana. You have to reflect on it.
mm,
And often also, like when we speak about it to others, that's also a way of reflecting on it and kind of making a concept our own. So that, and then you can explain it. So that's also manana. So that's very important because often we hear it goes in one ear and goes out the other, but that reflection that will help to kind of keep it in. So we have to kind of chew on what we hear for a little bit. But naturally, when we hear, we already start to do that. So the more we hear, the more we also start to reflect. Because when it goes in your mind, when you hear attentively, it goes in your mind, naturally start to think about it
mm.
during the day or in particular circumstances. But then ultimately to realize it, it's called nididhyasana. That means something described as meditation or worship, or it's really spiritual practice.
Mm. So there's first hearing, and then there's reflecting, and then there's putting into practice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Putting the teachings into practice, which means like, you hear that you have to be tolerant, and you reflect on what that means. Okay, well, it means that when I'm in a provoking situation, like yesterday, somebody yelled at me and I yelled back at them, and you reflect on that. This is what may not have been the right response.
Mhm.
So then
Who
you
did you yell
apply
at?
it. My wife was yelling at me, but I was reflecting on them. No, she's very nice. She doesn't yell at me so much. So, but then we apply the teaching by saying, "Oh no, I'm actually gonna." Once you actually come to the point of doing it, to tolerating it, then you're applying it. So that's one aspect of application. But another aspect of application is applying ourselves to spiritual practice. And our sadhana mainly is the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, because that purifies the heart, by which we can really assimilate and realize those teachings. Like without chanting, it's very hard to even have the strength, for example, to be tolerant, to be kind, to be compassionate. These are not things we want to artificially practice, but these are qualities of the soul we want to awaken. So our spiritual practice is so important to go from jnana to vijnana, or from this knowledge to realization, to have
Mm,
that, because spiritual practice leads to what's called anubhava, or experience. We have to really experience Krishna, and we have to experience ourselves as a soul. And that
mm,
is always propelling us forward. Whenever we get that experience of feeling I am a soul, I'm a part of Krishna, and Krishna is real. We have some sense of Krishna's presence when we chant and we read, when we hear, and that nourishes us, and that gives us, that awakens our spiritual nature. And the
yeah,
more we have those experiences, also the more our faith grows.
yeah. I I appreciate that so much. I was thinking of two things. One was last night I have a community group at the Bhakti Center, and we read the Bhagavad Gita, and we were reading the 12th chapter, the 12th chapter. the Bhagavad Gita, a short chapter, but very focused on bhakti and devotion. And we're reading Rancher Prime's translation in his commentary. And one of the verses he shared about, I think, the 6 items of surrender, and he was talking about humility. He's talking about being humble in our pursuit of spiritual life. And somebody read that and they were appreciating the list. And then he said, that last one, that's a pretty hard one. And I said, yeah, it is a really hard one. And I thought, and we started discussing the idea of, if I look at this material world, if I look at this life, of actually, it's one big free facility for me to become more humble. It's one big facility for me to learn tolerance, for me to practice the art of giving other people respect, for me to practice the art of forbearance, and for me to actually learn, like, what does it mean for me to be humble in this situation? And not humble because it's just self-deprecating and I have no sense of self-worth, but humble because that's the access point to grace. That's the access point when I think about what are the things that are actually getting in my way of peace and contentment and fulfillment and love. It's all of the armor of the heart. It's all of the gunk that we hear about, lust, anger, pride, envy, greed, illusion, enmity, resentment. Those are the real enemies of the heart. And I find myself very often, we find ourselves powerless to remove those. And so we actually have to pray to Krishna, please remove that. And please remove that. And when we become humble, then we actually, like we were talking about Arjuna's situation, of that like willingness to admit his inability to fix his problems on his own and turning to Krishna in a mood of surrender, then actually Krishna can step in and do amazing things for us. And when we're chanting or singing or reciting the Hare Krishna mantra or divine names of Krishna, it's actually a prayer that you're just actually like completely inviting Krishna into your heart. Like, can you please just clean up this mess of my heart? And it's not just something like some rule that I need to do or some obligation. It actually becomes something where I'm actually trying to almost like massage my consciousness with the spiritual sound vibration so that I can change the way I think and approach things. Because I love how you're saying it was in Krishna book. It's at the end of Krishna book, the second to last chapter, the story of Bhrigu Muni. Prabhupada mentions that one's character must be estimated by their ability to tolerate provoking situations, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's almost like I can't do that unless have a close relationship with Krishna in the heart, because he's the one that's reassuring. It's almost like kind of like sometimes you see like in sports, and like someone's about to get into a fight and someone's holding them back, like, no, it's not worth it, man. It's not worth it. Someone's holding them back.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, because you're holding me back, because you're here, I'm not going to do something crazy. And like Krishna's like that person that's holding us back. Like we have to feel Krishna in the heart. And Krishna's saying, it's not worth it. And you're like, you know what, Krishna, it's not worth it. You're worth it. And therefore I'm going to like let this go because it's not that important because of my connection to you.
Yeah. 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 It ties in a lot what you're saying with our original question, what it means to chant and be happy. Because there's a causal relationship between chanting and being happy. And then you can look at them as two separate things. That's something we touched about on our last discussion, which is a very interesting point, actually. Because first the causal relationship, you chant and you're being happy. And what really happens, if you really look at it, we're being happy, becoming happy from chanting because we get in touch with ourselves beyond the false ego. And why we're suffering actually is only really because of the false ego. Because of the false ego, the ahankara. Ahankara means I am the doer, but it also refers to identification with the body and especially with the mind. So if you really look at it, all our misery is really in the mind. So much misery in the mind, so much anxiety and fear, and all those enemies you mentioned, envy, illusion, even lust. It's like we have a strong desire for something. We even consider happiness in some way, but it's actually such a misery to have that, like, just that burning desire in your mind. So
Yeah.
So and that's there, but the false ego is what kind of ties us to all of that, what connects us to all of that.
Mm,
It makes us identify with all of that. So in the chanting, and that's the darkness. That's the darkness of the soul, really, is that absorption in the false ego. But you can't get rid of darkness with darkness. The
mm,
way to get rid of darkness is to come into the light. So chanting, I also like to think of chanting like that, of just coming into the light of Krishna. It's a
mm,
very nice shloka in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hayandakar Yahan Krishna Tahanahi Maya Radhikar. That Krishna is like the sun, and Maya or illusion is like darkness. And the root of our connection with Maya or the illusory energy is false ego.
mm.
So when we come in the presence of the sun, that illusion of Maya naturally dissipates. So and then we feel happy because that we starting to like the clouds of illusion are kind of parting, and we have this sense of like, oh yeah, I'm part of Krishna, I'm feeling Krishna's presence, and then we feel satisfied and happy. And then when we feel satisfied, it's very hard to tolerate things in this world or to really, you know, why are we becoming upset at other people? Why other people become upset at us? It's
Because they're
usually not so.
jerks.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's a true thing.
Wrong answer.
It's never the thing. It's not the like what you say. It's just your inner dissatisfaction which comes out, and it's
Mm,
just triggered by something externally. And we think we blame the external thing, but it's really our inner dissatisfaction. Just
yeah.
you know,
I was thinking of, and I looked up this verse. It's at the end of near the end of the second chapter of the Gita, um, chapter 2, verse 55, where Krishna speaks to Arjuna, and he says that when a person gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, so he's talking about the desire, like you were talking about, like lust or the desire to have something, which is really a story of the mind. Krishna goes on and says, which arise from mental concoction,
concoction. Yeah,
mana gatan. It's
yeah,
from the mind. It
yeah,
arises from the mind. When a person gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when the mind thus purified finds satisfaction in the self alone, then they're said to be in pure transcendental consciousness.
yeah. That's the foundation on which all these other qualities of a self-realized person takes place.
It's that when I want something, I'm actually buying into a story about that thing, right?
Yeah,
And so spiritual, when we come to like higher consciousness, it's just really exposing the story that we've been told or that we tell ourselves about the things that we spend so much time hankering after. And so it's not even about, which is I appreciate so much in the Gita, something I reference a lot in the very, very beginning instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna about the nature of what is real and what is false. It's what is eternal and what is temporary. You know, the word sat, the same word for truth, the same word for eternal. And that which
mm.
is, and so we talk about material things being bad and material desires being bad and evil and all these things. And it's gives it a bad rhetoric that is distasteful for people. Why are you so negative, and et cetera? And we don't have to think of it as bad or evil. We can just think of it as what is real and what is false, what is eternal and what is temporary, what is
Mm.
actually going to be of value to my eternal self, and what is just ephemeral, temporary glitter in the material world that is going to lead me to a dead end and disappoint me at the end of the day because it's not real fuel for the soul. And so I think that this verse is, I think of it often that so often we get so caught up in hankering after something and wanting something and needing to have something and arguing over it and defending it and spending our time and our energy and our anxiety and our time and our money and our resources into like pursuing things that are based off of just some story that I told about why I need that and what it's
Yeah,
going to do for me if I get it and why it's so important, etc. And I think that being able to, when we chant, when we meditate, when we bring mantra into our life, when we bring Krishna's name into our life, when we continuously every day have a check-in of reminding ourselves of spiritual truth, it's sort of it's combating that narrative, and it's almost kind of like chipping away at the interference of the mind so that we can actually get into the frequency of the soul.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Dana is saying in the chat, mental mirage.
It's a
That's
mental mirage.
yeah, it's very, very much what it is. I like the story in the Bhagavatam about Dhruva Maharaj, that he at one point his stepbrother is killed by a tribe called the Yakshas, and he goes to take revenge. Or revenge, yeah, he's seeking his
Yeah,
brother.
he's going to, it's
Yeah,
revenge.
yeah, it's revenge. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he's
You're
just
right.
going.
You said it first.
And then all these yakshas, they start to, you know, they battle in very mystic ways. They start to like create all these illusions by their mystic mantras and powers. How it works, we don't know. But he's seeing like snakes falling from the sky, and like, there's blood and pus coming. There's all kinds of things happening. And so he's getting a little bewildered. But then sages come and they give him a mantra with the name of Narayana, the name of a god. So it's a very far out story kind of. But what I like about the story is that by the name, by that mantra, which has the name of Krishna, Narayan in this case, he is able to dispel all these illusions. And it's such a graphic scene. He's standing alone facing this huge tribe of soldiers, and then they're already like, he's already outnumbered, and they throw out all these illusions at him, and it like becomes very overwhelming. But life feels like that sometimes, dealing with the mind. It's like we get this barrage of stuff happening within our minds. And it's kind of seems like be coming at us, seems like it's overwhelming. But then the mantra can so easily dispel it. Prabhupada did he told one devotee, I don't know the exact reference, but I think it was Jayapataka Swami, that if your mind is a little disturbed, just chant a little loud. Just chant very clear and loud, and it will go away.
Yeah. And it's so important to get reminders about why we do the things that we do, because otherwise it very easily becomes mechanical. It very easily becomes a chore, just something I need to do so that I don't get rejected, so that I don't go to hell, so that I don't end up, being in God's bad side, and blah blah blah. I have to do this so that I can, be accepted in a spiritual society, and it just becomes a chore. And then at a certain point, we're just like, individually and as a society, we're just like, why do we need this? Why all these rules, etc.? But when we actually honestly understand our situation in the material world and the cause of my suffering, the cause of my distress, the cause of and what chanting can genuinely do for me, what spiritual practice can genuinely do for me, then you become inspired. You become inspired to do it, because you understand that, I know it's hard, just like going to the gym. Nobody feels good. There's nothing good about going to the gym, like objectively, like you're tearing your muscles open, you're exhausting your body. It's terrible. It's actually like an objectively like abusive thing to your body, but it feels good to people because they understand the big, what's that?
It smells bad too.
It smells bad. It's sweaty, but yeah, it smells bad. And it feels good because we understand what's happening. I'm growing. I'm getting healthier. I'm prolonging my life potentially. I'm going to increasing my energy in the long run. And I feel like I'm growing. And so I push myself through that because I have a bigger picture in mind, example. And so I think that, the spiritual gym, we have to look at it in the same way. I want to be spiritually healthy. I want to change the way I think about myself and other people. I don't want to be so judgmental. I don't want to be chasing my material desires all over the universe. I don't want to be holding on to grudges and resentments. And I don't want to be, spending my time in anxiety because I'm worried about what people are going to think of me if I do or don't do this. And I want to change the way I look at myself and look at the world in a more loving, compassionate way, where I'm not uh, provoked by circumstances in such a deep way that I lash out and react in a certain way. And when we start to do that slowly, and when we start to share those experiences with other people and put ourselves in the association of other people that are doing the same thing, it becomes a very, very powerful, powerful practice. And so that's why we're here and that's what we're doing. And thank you for reminding us. We're already at time today. It just blows by. We're going to turn it over to Kimberly, who's got some takeaways for us. And then we're going to have our closing word.
All right, takeaways. Hear it, reflect on it, and put it into practice. Humility is the access point to grace. Find the real feel for the soul. Invite Krishna to clean up the mess. And chanting is coming into the light of Krishna that dispels darkness.
Invite Krishna to clean up the mess. What are you walking away with today, Vasudev? What's your closing word or thought or meditation?
My closing thought is, as you were just speaking, one thought came to mind is that often we think about, Krishna consciousness in one sense, bhakti yoga is religion in a way. It's God, it's like worship of God and so forth. And sometimes whenever we think of religion, we think of it in a moral way. Like moral means good, bad, punishment, reward. That's closely tied in that heaven, hell. That's a very, very religious thing. All over, all religions have that. But Krishna consciousness is really not about morality. Morality is there, but morality has a goal of leading towards self-realization and higher spiritual experience. So it's not so much about moralism. We're not moralists. We are spiritualists, transcendentalists. We want to have a transcendental experience of the soul, and that's why we follow certain principles. But it's not that we follow moral principles for moral sake. It's good to do that, but we really want to, because then immediately guilt comes in, all these things come in when you don't match the standard and you lose the goal out of sight. But when you know why you're doing this, why you're practicing certain principles, when you fall short, it's not such a big deal. It's just like, again, focusing towards your goal. And following principles to attain that goal, to get that higher experience of Krishna and of our own selves. So that's something I want to, I got from this discussion.
Thank you. It's almost like when we practice spirituality sincerely and steadily, morality is almost like a byproduct that naturally comes when you start to realize yourself and other people, respect for other living beings, respect for nature, respect for yourself as a spirit soul and a part of God's energy. It kind of naturally flows. You can't separate the two, but one is in service of the other. For me, I appreciate, or what I'm walking away with, is just this verse that we referenced in the Gita about the concoctions of the mind and the stories of my mind, and just being a little bit more conscious about the stories I tell myself about the things that I think I want. FOMO is we're in a FOMO epidemic in the world of feeling like I'm missing out on something, whether it's I'm missing out on something last week that I didn't go to, or whether it's just I'm missing out on the big things of life, like my career or my, this or that's waiting for me out there, or something that I didn't pursue or that I'm missing out on. And just to pause and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, what's the mental concoction that's taking place right now that I've telling myself about what this is? And let me pause and be present and create space between myself and that story, and recognize that actually, like spiritual FOMO Leslie mentioned there, actually everything is accessible to me right here, right now. There's nothing I'm missing out on because it's all right here in this moment. I have Krishna's name. I have my heartbeat. I have my breath. I have presence. I'm surrounded by spiritual energy because we are all, we we can spiritualize every moment of our lives. Like, I don't have to go out and achieve something in order to feel spiritually connected. And so just that mental concoction, which is actually the driving force of my desire. So that's what I'm walking away with. That's what I'm holding on to. I appreciate you guys. Grateful for all of you. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Vasudev. Thank you to our live Zoom audience. Thank you for all our listeners all over the world. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And if you don't like what you're hearing, please leave us a 5-star review anyways, just to be nice, be a service. It's helpful. It's spiritual. It's the moral thing to do. So please, thank you so much. And we'll be back again tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you all so much, everybody. Bye-bye.